My name is Dragos Dumitriu. I'm going to wrap up the day for you with a presentation on Kanban coaching, what everyone ought to know. What everyone ought to know are the 4 principles and 6 practices of Kanban. That's where we start. Anyone not familiar with them? I'm asking that for a reason, good reason. Anyone not familiar? Good. Next slide. I can take more time now speaking about myself. Yes. I work for a company called CC Pace. CC Pace is in Fairfax, Virginia, outside DC. Anybody had any training from CC Pace? There you go, quite a few hands. You see a list of clients to the left and right. And you see a couple of my certifications to the left and right. And somewhere in the middle is my title at CC Pace. It used to be Director of Agile Coaching and Consulting. And my role changed a little bit. I'm still managing coaching and consulting, but we look at them from the perspective of services to the customers that you see to the left and the right there. And CC Pace has been in business for 35 years. Impressive number. And something else that's relevant to this picture is that most of the business of CC Pace, over 80%, comes from repeat customers. That they've had some of the customers, some very large customers in DC area, they've had for over 30 years. Well, why is that interesting? Imagine 30 years ago. Some of you, it's hard. Some of you can. Some of us can. Yeah. But these customers, as they came back for new services, for new things. When CC Pace started, it was an energy consulting company in DC. And the CEO, who's currently CEO, 35 years ago, he bought it from the Shriver family, right? The Kennedys, right? Anyway, they evolved from being an energy consulting company. They moved into financial services, then into agile services. They started with XP, with the folks who were pioneering XP around 2000. And they moved into agile. I was looking for the names here. Ron Jeffries, they used to work with Ron Jeffries. Familiar with the name? And familiar with XP, right? So then we adopted Kanban, right? Part of the adoption was they adopted me to adopt Kanban. And lately, I think the latest thing we adopted is SAFE. And some of our customers are requesting it. Now, what I tell customers when I go on site, some of them ask me, are you a lean guy? And from the way they ask, even if I would be, I would say no. They're very serious people in DC, right? They asked me if I'm an agile guy. And they asked me if I'm a Kanban guy. And I said, no, I'm a solution guy. Look at my title. Right? I changed it from agile. Right? So it's about you. And again, as these customers are coming back to us, they come back for different things, and I find myself wearing different hats. Anybody in here except for Klaus, which for the last 5 years I've known him, he always wears that hat. Klaus, raise your hand. Okay, there you go, that hat. Anybody else wearing more hats than one? Yeah, pretty much everybody. Is it confusing for you sometimes? Yeah. Is it confusing for customers? Do your customers know what hat you're wearing? Uh-huh. So this is part of the context. I'm setting up the context a little bit about what we're going to talk about. Because everything that you ought to know about Kanban coaching has to do with hats. Klaus, thank you. No one else helping. Okay. Well, again, our roles sometimes are confusing to ourselves. I find it myself. I'm not a customer. He wants training. I sign an SOW for the US government or some agency department for doing training, and I end up doing coaching. And at some point, someone is asking, what are you doing? You're not doing training. Right? And sometimes they're right. Sometimes the customer doesn't know what he wants. But does it help if we make our hats explicit? How many people in here consider themselves coaches? Okay. How many people consider themselves trainers? Are they about the same? Right? How many people consider themselves mentors? Yeah. Anybody considers themselves consultants? How many people are in manager roles? Do you think there could be some conflicts between the different roles that we have? And some confusion, not just to us? I mean, my wife is here and she's confused a lot of times. I'm going home, I don't even know what hat to wear, right? Depends what part of the country I'm coming from. Uh-oh. Color resolution. I have some colors in here, but I think this is okay. My goal today, and what I have learned starting the hard way of learning, was the interactions I have with customers. And I had to figure out how to clarify what my role is there, how to clarify, help them understand what problems are we trying to solve together. What is my role? What is your role? Because depending on the role I play for customers, I'm setting some expectations of the roles they have to play. Right? It's a play. It's not a monologue. You cannot do an enterprise transformation by yourself. There are some responsibilities that are shared. I didn't make up this chart. It's a chart well used in consultant. I have a reference on the bottom. The slide deck will be made available. But there's about, okay, who is the expert? Left to right. Who is the expert? Is it the client? Or is it you? Maybe you sometimes are a client, sometimes you're a service provider. So on that scale, are you the one asking questions, or are you the one giving answers, right? Where are we on that scale? And it's interesting, well, at least something works well. It's interesting to see how consultants are up here. They give answers, right? In this quadrant, they're actually quite at the edge. They are experts. You cannot get any more expertise than a consultant, being a consultant, right? And if we move left, we see another hat that we wear quite often as a trainer. You see manager, and I'll talk about this just briefly. I'm not going to focus on the role of the manager in this presentation. However, just as a note, I want to say that even though on this chart, the manager role, you see it, and statistically, this is where you'll find it in most organizations, is in this giving answers part, right? And mostly acting as an expert. How does that work? How does that work in your organization or the organizations you consult for? Where would you like to see it? Where do you think it belongs in order to enable change, to support transformations?
I would divorce giving answers from making decisions.
Yeah, but most of the times we talk about supervisory skills and supervisory mindset. And the way it is right now, it is a supervisory mindset. And what I have noticed, again, some things I learned the hard way or I learned the right way in the last 25 years for all the companies I work for, is that you cannot be in a leadership role. You cannot be a good leader if you want without coaching skills. So sometimes folks in organizations separate leadership from management. And they say, okay, manager has a supervisory role, and the leader has both manager and coaching roles. I think the coaching mindset belongs to both to leaders and to managers, right? And I have a blog on it. It's on the CC Pace website. There's about 3 or 4 pages, and I'm going to add more to it. So the focus for this conversation will be to look at the consultant hat, the trainer hat, the mentor hat, and the coaching hat, and kind of how I find this very common for the folks who attend these conferences. and for the folks who are interested in coaching, that they are wearing one of these 4 hats. Some of you or some of us may be managers, but we don't really use that competence when we go into on a customer site. Make sense? So for everybody's help here, I put a couple of brief definitions. Some of you, I'm sure, know a whole lot more than what I have here on a couple of paragraphs. But I'm spelling this out because we're going to do an exercise, and I want to set a common ground for everybody in the room. So from a Kanban perspective, consultants, we provide expertise. We inform clients on how they can solve the problems, right? They're not hiring us necessarily to lead those engagements. And this is very common when you work with the government. They hire someone to provide a roadmap, then they hire someone else to deliver on the roadmap. Or sometimes there's a combination or some separation of duties. Make sense? Anybody disagrees with this? We're experts, we have to tell. Training. Well, as trainers, we are experts. We teach the science to develop Kanban skills, thinking, and capabilities. Sometimes in customers may ask us how to do certain things, and we may answer, right? But it's not the outcome of the training, right? The examples we provide as trainers are a bit different than the examples that mentors give in a mentor and mentee relationship. Typically, mentors have their mentorship is an unequal relationship where the mentor has more experience than the mentee, right? But that happens usually within the same organization, or it may be a CIO that may have a CIO mentor from somewhere else. I did work in an organization that had a parent organization, very large, very famous. But the CIO there had 2 mentors, and one was the CIO of the other organization, the other one was the CIO from Microsoft. Okay. The other one was Accenture. So the company I was working for was Avanade, which was a startup created by Microsoft and Accenture. So it kind of makes sense, right? And then coaching. Coaching is the one of the 4 roles recognized that can enable long-term change in organizations. Why? Because it allows clients to be reflective and take responsibility for their role in the organization. May I be impertinent and ask the question, how many people thought they were doing coaching while they're actually doing consulting? Nobody? So I've been called a coach. I've had a job that said coach, but I would go into organizations and tell them what to do. Do you find yourself in that situation? They had no clue. They weren't looking for a coach. They weren't ready for a coach. If I would ask them, well, how would you do it? What have you tried? How did that work for you? I said, what are you talking about? You're the Kanban expert, right? So a lot of times, it's very important to differentiate between these 4 approaches. I have a couple of slides just to aid in this comparison. The colors make it a bit hard to read, but pretty much it says consulting, mentoring, and coaching at the top. And then on the left, we have the input comes from the facilitator in consulting roles. And starting from more to less, the actions that the facilitator takes, in this case, the consultant. Trainer is somewhere in there between consulting and mentoring, but the lines blur when we talk about actions. The actions are listed here. It starts with instructing in this big wide space, and then as the space narrows down, it's about giving advice, offering guidance, giving feedback, and the least intrusive one here is making suggestions, somewhere close to this, right? So it's a lot stronger than just making suggestions. You make suggestions, you start to cut into the coaching space. As a coach, you're listening to understand, you're reflecting, you're paraphrasing, summarizing, right? And you kind of finish with questions that help the mentee to raise awareness. Are we on the same page? So over here is, I can't even read it. It's more about solving a problem for someone, while all the way at the right here is about asking questions, again, directive and non-directive actions. Now, these actions don't happen in a vacuum. The clients are somewhere on a continuum, and again, they may go back and forth on that continuum depending on what they do. But what does the client, what hat does the client need us to wear at a specific point in time when they engage us or for a particular initiative, right? They may be somewhere to the left in a more beginning, more of, changes are simpler to adopt. Maybe it is at the team level, and then they progress, they start to work differently, and there's an aspiration that in the end they will behave and think differently, which is a lot more complex change. Again, the roles we will take, where we're going to play consultants, trainers, mentors, or coaches, or where do we get help from within the organization to help the organization build their own mentors, coaches, and sometimes trainers. It depends on the size, it depends on the scope, depends on where they are on this continuum. Yep, makes sense? Well, thank you for coming. It's quite a large group. I realized too late that there were only 2 sessions, so I should have expected more people. The idea here is that I would like to ask you to break into 4 groups. So raise your hand if you have a preference for, let's say, consulting. Oh, we have 1 person, okay. Raise a hand if you have a preference for doing training. Okay. And how about mentoring? Okay, quite a few folks in mentoring. And coaching? A lot of folks in coaching. Well, I'm going to ask you to kindly create 4 groups, and maybe you may have a strong preference, so go for it. But if you see a lonely guy sitting in one corner, yeah, please join him. So we're going to use the 4 scenarios I had in the workshop description, right? So some of the scenarios that we identify is that people come to coaching or that generates a lot of questions are, there are WIP limits and they have been broken, what do I do? Right? There's work on the Kanban board, but there's no movement, but everybody's busy and we don't know what they work on. Definitely they don't work on the work that's on the board. What do I do? Work is flowing, the board is not updated. What do I do? And the last what do I do is that I forecast cycle times, but I still get bombarded with requests for estimates. So the idea here that for the rest of the time, we're going to break into 4 groups. We're going to take each scenario, probably we're going to time it to about 5 minutes. We're going to go through 1 or 2 scenarios. Each group is going to write 1 paragraph, so discuss it a little bit amongst yourselves, and then wear one of the 4 hats that you broke into the group for, the consulting, training, mentoring, or coaching hat, and come up with a 1-paragraph recommendation for the what do I do based on each scenario. But please start with scenario A. I'll say something when we have 5 minutes passed, right? So let's break into 4 groups, maybe towards, maybe away from the camera. Maybe we have 2 groups kind of on that side of the room, one group over here, and maybe 1 over here. So let's say starting from that speaker box, consulting, training, mentoring, and coaching. So let's hear from the consulting folks.
All right. So as consultants, we're supposed to have all the answers. So for the first question, the WIP limits are being broken. One of the first things we do is say, well, when are the last time the WIP limits have been updated? Right? Last week, a year ago? Maybe some things happened since then, staff turnover, all kinds of stuff. Second one is, well, maybe you should add an expedite lane. They don't have an expedite lane. And the third one was, there may be issues that aren't really captured that have caused us to want to break the WIP limits, such as, for example, there's a blocker, but maybe we didn't capture it, we don't see that. Or maybe there's a really big item that's holding up the pipeline and there's a pressure of a lot of little things behind it. So those are the reasons we gave for, the advice we gave for scenario A. You go to B?
Yeah,
all right, so B is there's work on the board, but just not all of it. So one of the first questions I always like to ask is, well, are we tracking the work we're doing with estimates? That's certainly an issue on our project. The second one is, well, if we're going to try to understand what are all the different work item types, we need to make our policies explicit for what we should capture as a work item and what you don't bother capturing as a work item. Like, are your regular meetings work items? Well, no, but you certainly want to capture things like estimates. So we should make that policy explicit. The third one is, let's see, there's one other thing. Oh yes, just to do, as a consultant, you want to do a work item analysis, right? So we want to see, do we have all the work items? You know, maybe do some interviews with different team members, and we want to do a workflow analysis. Maybe there's some columns missing on the board, right? So we want to understand that. Okay, D, yes, we forecast cycle times and get bombarded with requests for estimates. So first of all, we want to make sure that the requester really understands the cost. Do you realize that it's taking this much of our total bandwidth to give you these estimates? Second one is we want to allocate capacity for the estimates. So we'll reserve 20% of our team's bandwidth for that. And then we'll explain, we'll show them the data. So we'll do a David Anderson presentation and show them Little's Law and just dazzle them with scientific information and statistics. But before we do that, we'll make sure that the data that we've captured really would support such an argument.
That would be a good idea. Just a second. Before you run away, so you were in a consulting, you wear the consulting hat, yeah? What do you guys think? Did this group wear the right consulting hat? So they're experts, they're being paid to tell you what to do, and they tell you how to do it. Did they do that? Sorry? Okay. What do you think now in retrospective? Were you coaching or consulting?
Well, a lot of times as a consultant, what I would do is interview team members and things and then present those findings to senior management. Because a lot of times the answers are already there in the organization, but the C-level doesn't see that.
Is that consulting or coaching?
That's a good question.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's hear from the coaching folks. Where are the coaching folks? Can stick it there? Why don't you take this one? Something interesting I don't have on the slides, but it's well known. We are much better at seeing what other people do wrong than to see what we are doing wrong. Yeah? I'd be surprised if it doesn't come up again. All right, so coaching.
Okay, so for A, the questions are, what is going on? Do you think WIP limit is correct? Help me understand the purpose of the WIP limit. Is this a problem for you? What is the impact of breaking this limit? What have you tried? Why do you think it didn't work? Of course, that would be after they answered that. What can we try here? What can be done downstream? And do we know the root cause of this? So that's it for A.
What do you think? Which one? And you also did D? Okay, let's hear D.
Skip to D?
Yeah, skip to D.
Okay, so for D, you forecast cycle times and you get bombarded with requests for estimates. All right, so what is the reason for estimate requests? So that would be the question back to them. What is the reason for this request for estimates? And then these couple of questions, I'm not sure that we understood who the questions were coming from when we asked this. Do you have service agreements? Are the SLAs transparent? So those would have been questions if we weren't sure if those things were in place. As well, is there a communication issue? Is that why you're asking for this? Is there a roadmap? How much risk are you willing to accept? Can I help you understand what cycle times mean?
Good, thank you.
Sure.
All right, good job. Can I have the mic back? Thank you. All right, mentoring hat.
Yeah,
the
we
mentoring
didn't
hat?
get to cover all four, so we'll just do the two that we went through. I think as for the first thing of the mentoring part, it's very much like the coaching. We need to agree on what problem we're trying to solve. So the first thing is trying to agree on the actual observations. Are we seeing the same problem from the same direction? And then when we know that, we can start to offer our observations from other industries and other companies. So in this particular situation, it could be that it's a lot of defects overwhelming the team, and that's what makes WIP limits being broken. We can then offer observations in terms of the consequence of trying to solve everything at once, and that from other companies it turned out that they literally solved nothing by doing that and just overburdened the team for longer periods of time. And then it's up to that particular person to do what they want with those observations.
And can you read the statement below?
That was a statement below for the WIP limit
Okay.
thing. And then again, the same for D. We need to understand why are they asking this question. Is it from a prioritization perspective? Is it from a cost perspective because they don't have stable capacity? Are we seeing things the same way? If they're asking for it from a prioritization perspective, then maybe we can offer them observation from how you can do sizing estimates pretty quickly. And other companies are seeking in that, so it's no longer a huge burden doing estimates. If it's because they are asking to know whether things take 15 hours or 17 hours to solve, and they think that's important from a cost perspective, then we can offer them the advice that we have never seen anybody succeed with that level of precision. So you would be unique to be able to do it at that level. And
If you don't know him, ask him for his blog. He's a very prolific writer, obviously. He can speak as fast as he can write. Thank you. So, did he do a good job? Did his group do a good job? Yes? Mentoring? Okay. Let's hear it from the training folks. Which, you guys want to fight for it? Okay.
Do you have a preference which questions we do? Or
Take your best shot.
For A.
Do one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I forget what the questions were already. So for the first question, yeah, there are WIP limits, but they're being broken. We said there are many possible ways to solve this problem on a given team. For now, we propose a working agreement made up front and committed to by the team around your WIP limit.
So if I'm the client, I would say in that situation, you know, we break the WIP limits all the time. We know this is not good. We need some training. So I think I was looking for a training recommendation, but I also have to agree, maybe I didn't make it very clear that's what I was looking for. But like, what would you train me on? How can you help me? What training do I need in order to understand how to better define my WIP limits?
Yeah, I mean, I think the proposal was like, yes, try to create a working agreement so like everyone would agree on the team. Like, but, so I'm the worst one to present this because I don't know what a lot of this stuff is.
No, that's all right.
So everyone would agree up front. Well, so part of this is like we don't know exactly what the problem is, but assuming that we have a WIP limit, but maybe people haven't committed to it or so forth, we would do it. but also with this idea, and you can probably talk to this more than I can, that maybe that's okay for right now.
Okay.
Maybe you don't need that whip limit. Maybe there are other areas to focus on. It's a lot to get across in training.
Let me
because
ask you,
more
what
than
hat do
30.
you usually wear at work? Out of the four?
Me personally, more of a coach and or mentor.
You're a good
Yeah.
coach.
And also a person trying to explain other people's ideas. Yeah.
No, sorry. Thank you. We're going to have to wrap it up. It's not easy, is it? It's not easy. Did anyone find themselves at client side being expected to perform in one role, performing in another? Yeah. Is it okay? I think it is, as long as we tell the client and set expectations, because I run into clients that get you, especially on a fixed time, fixed cost, or, again, government work, and it's very good to say, look, this is what you hired me for, here is what I noticed, I think we need to change something here, or at least we need to have a new agreement that we're going to do something different. But you see how I see a predisposition to go into coaching. And I also see kind of a bit, it's hard for us a lot of times to be firm. Here is what I think you need to do. Here is what you should be doing, right? You find it more difficult? Yeah. It is, right? I will take some pictures of what we found out, and I'm going to insert some comments. I will wrap up the presentation because there's a big, important event coming up, the reception. Feel free to grab me and ask me questions. This is one of the quotes I use in my training and coaching materials, but pretty much change is nonlinear, right? It can go backwards, forwards, and sideways. And it's not just for clients, but it's also for, do you hear me in stereo if I speak into microphones? No. Okay. But it's also for us as performers, as performing under one of those hats, right? A lot of times, but we have to be more aware. I think what I wanted to point out with this exercise is we could all benefit from being more aware about what we do. And one way to be more aware is we have to figure out, how to do a better job. So it starts with us. It starts with each one of us. Change takes leadership. It starts with us. And my message is learn, unlearn, and relearn. Sometimes you have to get some extra hats and be comfortable switching them. And sometimes it's fun to practice switching those hats. So if you have any burning questions, I'll hang out here for a little bit. I hope you enjoy the exercise. And always keep in mind that the questions we ask in any situation determine the answers we get. And I definitely have to work on that slide where I'm asking you questions, I think. But overall, I think it was a good, fun exercise, yeah? Thank you.